Nos hemos acostumbrado a las monedas en papel, a las monedas en metálico y también nos hemos acostumbrado a que éstas sean emitidas por gobiernos, pero no siempre fue así. Durante mucho tiempo el dinero era emitido siempre por entes privados, pero hoy estamos viendo una recuperación de esa tradición con un nuevo tipo de moneda, monedas electrónicas como el Bitcoin y otras monedas que pues, son completamente diferentes a lo que hemos tenido en el pasado. Para tratar de entender esta situación, quiero agradecer a Saifedean Ammous, quien es autor o especialista en Bitcoin y en criptomonedas, quien es autor de un libro publicado por Editorial Deusto en español que se llama El patrón Bitcoin, la alternativa descentralizada a los bancos. Vamos a hacer esta conversación en la que nos estamos enlazando hasta Jordania en inglés para que usted pueda escuchar directamente a mi entrevistado, pues directamente en inglés. Thank you very much, Saifedean Ammous, for speaking to us. And let me start for asking a very simple question. People don't necessarily trust crypto coins because they believe that crypto money is something that has no intrinsic value and therefore it can disappear at any time. Can this happen?
I mean, personally, I would say that the only digital currency that I would put any money in and that I would recommend anybody put money in is Bitcoin. And I think if you study the difference between all the different currencies, you will see that there is a very strong difference between Bitcoin and all the other ones. Bitcoin's been around for 13 years now. And if you study it, if you look at its structure, if you look at how it operates, you see that it has a few properties that cannot be replicated among other digital currencies, which is why I think it is something that's going to last for a long time. And it's something that I would, that I can count on, which I cannot say about all the other digital currencies. So to begin with, Bitcoin doesn't have anybody who controls it. So you don't have to worry about the people in charge of Bitcoin changing the rules or increasing the supply or making new amount of Bitcoin to devalue your existing Bitcoin, because there are no people in charge of Bitcoin. You are in charge of Bitcoin. Everybody who is part of the Bitcoin network is able to download the software they want. They download it, they put it on their computer, and they get to see the code that runs the network, and they get to see how the network operates. And nobody can force you to change the code of your Bitcoin client. So that makes me that makes Bitcoin, I think, different from all the other digital currencies. And I think if you look at the track record that it has had over the past 12, 13 years, we see that nobody's been able to change the supply. Nobody has been able to change any of the important consensus parameters of the network. And that's led to the fact that the supply increases at a decreasing rate. So the inflation rate effectively in Bitcoin is constantly declining. And so as the demand for Bitcoin increases, there's no mechanism for anybody to increase the supply of Bitcoin and bring the price down. And so that's why the price continues to go up and up and up over time.
Yeah, precisely. Bitcoin started with very small value per coin, and it's shot up immensely, astronomically. How can you explain that? Why does that happen?
I think it's happened because, as I explained in my book, I think the argument that I put forward in the book is that Bitcoin is the first thing that is truly strictly scarce. It's the only thing in human history that we have ever discovered where you cannot make more of it no matter how much the demand increases. So if demand for copper increases, copper miners can dig and find more copper. If demand for the Mexican peso increases and the value of the Mexican peso goes up, the Mexican central bank can intervene and increase the supply of the pesos and finance government spending and make sure the value of the peso doesn't go up too much. Same is true with gold, with all national currencies, with every market commodity. If demand for computers increases, we can make more computers. If demand for gold increases, we can make more gold. Bitcoin is the one thing that is different from this. If demand for Bitcoin increases, we will still make the same number of Bitcoin as predicted. So there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin. That's it. And the schedule for creating Bitcoin, it was set initially to be 50 new Bitcoins every 10 minutes. And then after 4 years, it dropped to 25 Bitcoins every 10 minutes. And then 4 years later, it dropped to 12 and a half Bitcoins every 10 minutes. And now currently it's at 6.25 Bitcoin every 10 minutes, and that's it. And it doesn't matter if there are 10 people around the world using Bitcoin only, or if there are 8 billion people, the entire planet is using Bitcoin. We will only get 6.25 Bitcoin every 10 minutes. And that's something that we've never had before. There's never been anything where you can know for sure that this is what the supply is going to be, regardless of what the demand is going to be. And I think this means that as the demand begins to increase, there's no way to increase the supply to meet the demand. And so the only way to meet the increase in demand is for the price to increase. So to increase the value of the existing coins so much that they can, that the new demand can be met from the new coins.
I've heard central bankers and economists claim that Bitcoin is a mirage. I've heard others claim that it's a Ponzi scheme. What do you tell them?
I mean, central banks should really be, they say about people who live in glass houses shouldn't throw rocks. I think it's very telling that central banks who really do run Ponzi schemes, I mean, you look at what national currencies are, they're constantly losing value. You look at, obviously in Mexico, the Mexican peso. Mexico has a great history of inflation. It's the value of the peso just continues to go down over time, and you've had hyperinflation many times before. But even the strongest, best national currencies, the euro, the dollar, the yen, the Swiss franc, if you look at their value in real terms compared to hard assets, compared to real estate, compared to gold, compared to commodities, you see that over time the value of those currencies continues to decline. Well, why is that the case? We have more houses, we have more cars, we have more gold, we have more oil, we have more of everything today than we did 30 years ago. And yet everything is much more expensive. It's not because things are more expensive, things are actually more abundant. In terms of wage rate, you can buy more oil, more coffee, more gold with 1 hour of work today than you could 30 years ago, because productivity today is much higher than it was 30 years ago. But in terms of your national currency, you can't. You can buy much less. The value of the national currency continues to decline. So why? Well, it's because national central banks run their currencies like a Ponzi scheme. They are always counting on new demand to increase the value of the currency, and they continue to devalue the supply of the currency by making more of it. So Bitcoin, it really is different from this because you can't increase the supply of Bitcoin. And so for me, it's impossible to compare it to a Ponzi scheme, because in the Ponzi scheme, you're paying the new investors you're paying the returns of the old investors from the investment of the new investor. That's how a Ponzi scheme works. You're not running a business where revenue is coming in, and you're not paying the shareholders from the revenues. You're paying the shareholders from the money that is coming in from new investors. Well, Bitcoin doesn't have investors. Bitcoin doesn't have revenues, and it doesn't have returns. So there is no return on holding Bitcoin. So there's no way to call it a Ponzi scheme, because all that you do with Bitcoin is that you buy it and you hold it. So there's nobody giving you money from other people in order for the price of, in order for your wealth to increase. You're just buying a commodity like buying gold. And that's what money is. Money is just a commodity whose price appreciates because everybody holds it, because it is the most liquid asset. And because it is the most liquid asset, everybody wants to hold their savings in it. And so its value continues to go up over time. And a Ponzi scheme, on the other hand, the value of the Ponzi scheme goes up because you're paying the old investors, you're paying them with the revenues from the new investors. So you're promising people that there are returns. You're telling people there is a business that's making returns, and these returns are high, but you're not actually making returns. You're lying to them, and you're paying them with the new investors. Well, with Bitcoin, there's no returns, so nobody's making a lie. And also, there's nobody behind Bitcoin. There's no authority that is able to assign Bitcoin, take Bitcoin from you, and give Bitcoin to others. Bitcoin is just a commodity, like a market commodity, like copper, like oil, like gold. Anybody can produce it, anybody can sell it, anybody can buy it. And it's a totally free market. The only reason that anybody buys Bitcoin is because they want to buy Bitcoin. And, nobody gets to decide the price of Bitcoin. The price of Bitcoin is determined on the market. So I can even understand why central banks would not be excited about it, because what we have here is a form of money that is infinitely superior to national central bankers' currency. Just look at the last 10 years of the performance of any national currency, look at how its value has done, and then compare it to Bitcoin over the last 10 years. And you can see Bitcoin does much better. If you want to save for the next 10 years, obviously holding your money in Bitcoin is going to, I think, do much better than holding it in any other national central bank. Not because it's a Ponzi, not because anybody is promising you returns, but because the supply is fixed and nobody can make more of it. That's ultimately what it comes down to, in my opinion.
But isn't there a possibility of an abrupt collapse? We've seen some adjustments, negative adjustments, very major. And then, of course, Bitcoin has actually come back. But do you see the possibility of a major collapse? Or another question, is there a limit to how much Bitcoin can grow in value?
There are possibilities of crashes. Bitcoin has crashed before 50, 60, 70, 80, even 90% before. There are always crashes. Yet the interesting thing is that even after it crashes 80%, it crashes 80% after it had gone up 30-fold. So it still ends up being up. So Bitcoin has never been down on a 4-year time scale. Like, it goes up and down, but over 4 years, it's always been up at least 100%. This is what has always been the case with Bitcoin. So yes, it is volatile because it is very, it's very small currently, and so one very rich person deciding to get into Bitcoin is going to increase the demand for Bitcoin, and is going to cause the price to go up, and it's going to cause a mania, and it's going to cause a lot of people to come in, and it's going to cause a lot of people to come in with leverage, which is going to cause the price to shoot up massively. But then, when these people start getting bored, or when that person wants to sell, we're still at a stage where rich individuals can influence the price. So we can still get a lot of volatility in Bitcoin over the years. But interestingly and importantly, I think, is that the crashes always end up much higher than where the price was a few years earlier. So, now the Bitcoin has crashed to 38,000 from 68,000. It's crashed almost 50%. And yet it's still up tenfold, basically, over the last 2 years. It's 10 times roughly what it was worth 2 years ago. So if you are willing to hold it for the long term, if you want to think about it as a long-term investment, then it's done incredibly well, even with all of the volatility and even with all of the crashes. Now, the question of whether there is a limit, I don't think there is a limit. There is a limit on the number of Bitcoins, but there's no limit on the market value of Bitcoin. That's something that people can decide. So there's no reason why one Bitcoin couldn't be worth $1,000. There was a time in which saying that Bitcoin was going to hit $1,000 was absurd. There was a time in which people saying Bitcoin is going to hit $1 sounded like it's crazy. 1,000 sounded crazy. 10,000 sounded crazy. Well, now people tell me Bitcoin is going to crash to 10,000. And that is going to be the end of Bitcoin. A few years ago, they were telling me 10,000 is insane. Bitcoin is never going to hit 10,000. Now they're saying it's going to crash down to 10,000, and that means that it's failed. So, if you keep a long-term perspective on things, you see that it can continue to go up, and there's no reason why it can stop. If people continue to see that it is a better form of money than national currencies and gold, which I think it is, and I think the market is discovering this, then the price can continue to go up, and there's no limit to how far it can go up.
I want to thank you, Saifedean Ammous, for having spoken with us about your book, El Patrón Bitcoin, la alternativa descentralizada a los bancos centrales, publicado en español por Deusto. And thank you for letting us know your ideas about Bitcoin. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me. Have a good day.
Y a usted, amigo televidente, que hace posible este programa, se lo agradezco también. Esto es todo por hoy, pero no se le olvide. Nos vemos la próxima.